He bogged down right at the start, which played into the hands nicely of Alessio Dono, who had done a fantastic job in qualifying and put the car in pole position. And unfortunately, one or two cars would find their way into the Armco barrier, one car in particular, that being Mohammed Amdi, and we saw him unfortunately out of the race. That brought out a safety car, and then lots of battles going on throughout the being tagged there. And as you can see, Alessio Dono making contact with Emanuele Maria Tabacchi. That would bring the end of Alessio Dono's race, and he was such a star in race one. So it was all about Doriane Penn. Had she done enough? Yes, she had. She became the Trofeo Pirelli champion. And Doriane Penn then celebrating for Scuderia Niki. It was going to be a fight to the finish. Sam Smith and Nicolo Schiro here having a bit of a moment, but Sam Smith was going to be absolutely committed. Around went the number 26 car. That brought out the red flags, and when the race restarted then, Thomas Neubauer was certainly on something of a mission. What could he do to chase down Alessio Dono? Well, you could see one or two cars running out into the gravel, and this move by Emanuele Maria Tabacchi on Alessandro Cozzi cost him a... The fight for P4 between Alex Fox and Fons Skeltermar. Skeltermar lines up Alex Fox on the start-finish straight and executes a brilliant overtake through turn one. P4 for Fons Skeltermar. In the AM battle, the jump on Yacine Ferrari, but in the second part of the start, Yacine Ferrari was okay, and into turn number one, Henri Acid and Hanno Laskowski and Hendrik Viol all running very, very wide, but Yacine Ferrari had got the measure of Felix Herziger and converted them. So David Dicker here on the inside, and from that particular angle we couldn't tell whether someone came across or whether the gap just disappeared. In any event, it meant two cars together colliding, and there you can see the black flag, and that was a really rather bold and ambitious overtake. Find the runoff areas and run wide, and unfortunately that was one of them onto the grass. And of course, as tyre degradation really played its part towards the end of the race, let alone some panel rubbing from some of the other drivers, including the likes of Dennis DiMarco, as you can see, and making no mistake about so doing. And next in his target sights was going to be the car of Alexei Komarov, and it took him a couple of turns, probably more than he would have liked to have done that, but he did do it. And Alvaro Ramos and Fritz Muller were also having something of a battle, which it was going to be Fritz Muller that would win that one as we enjoy the highlights. But trying perhaps a bit too hard. He makes contact with Sergio Paulet. That sends Hugo Delacour around and plays nicely into the hands of Marco Pulcini. At the checkered flag in Trofeo Pirelli AM, Christian Brun. Together there, Agata Smolka and Corinna Gosner. Sure enough, the safety car out once again, and eventually we would go back to racing, but with virtually half the race duration done and dusted. Short, sharp blast to the... Adrian Sutil in race one had been in a real overtaking mood. He retained that mood in race two, and David Gosner, right from the back of the grid, was moving himself up the order. What a battle that went on between Tom Fleming and Adrian Sutil here. And in the end, Adrian Sutil would prove to be victorious in this little battle between the two of them. The former Formula One star using all his experience. 30-minute race one. Into turn number one, Alessio Dono, fine. Not so, Adrian Sutil getting a touch from Hanno Laskowski, the leader of the sunshine. When we did go to racing, of course, Ernst Kirschmeyer busting to win the championship. Giuseppe Romelli going round, and unfortunately James Wyland would lose out, which would mean, in terms of Copa Shell champion, it would go the way of... towards turn number two, and getting to the inside of Oscar Rinčević was NM, and unfortunately getting to the inside of Tibor Valint was Cristiano Marchel, which would mean a drive-through penalty for Cristiano Marchel, and in avoidance Fabrizio Fontana before the Trofeo Pirelli cars would line up on the grid. And Dylan Medler on pole position, though, was usurped immediately by Matt Krajewski. Mark Musso lost the back end of the car and very soon found himself in the gravel trap, properly beached. That would bring a small intermission to the race proceedings, but very quickly we got going once again, and Dylan Medler perhaps sniffing the opportunity of getting that race lead back. Tony Davis was driving a brilliant race as well.
Today, from the overall pole, gets into the lead. His teammate on the outside of the front row getting into second, but the yellow car, Amir Kermani, diving down to the inside of the curbs, past a couple of cars. He had to give that spot up, but a man on the move, Martin Burrows, is one of the points leaders in the AM1 category, making some moves, dives down to the inside of Dave Musial and is able to move away then. Lisa Clark attacking on another rookie, Matt Kane, down into turn one, got her well placed on the exit of two, set up for the exit of three. She was able to take that position away. But later on, Anthony DiCarlo trying to go by Jan Bernier, who not only went by him, but got into Matt Kane.
But an even better start from Christian Kinch, who goes around the outside of Ernst Kirchmeier. So too does Joachim Olander. There's contact between Giuseppe Romelli and Axel Sartingen. That damages the suspension on Sartingen's car. He's out. Laurent Demuse has to take a big move to avoid contact with von Skeltermar.
His race did not last as long as he would have liked. Under pressure from Thomas Neubauer, and also Thomas Neubauer under pressure from Dorian Penn was John Vortique. Ongibardi was having a real go as well. He sealed, of course, the championship yesterday in his category, and a little poetic spin onto it. Here, Eric Chung decided that he would go for the inside. Unfortunately, Miroslav Bibo was really rather wet. From Alessio Dono and Thomas Neubauer and Emanuele Maria Tabacchi having a battle, which ended up not so well for Emanuele Maria Tabacchi, who was in the gravel. Of course, Ongibardi in Ferrari Challenge Trofeo Pirelli Am could seal the championship in this race. And one or two casualties by the wayside.
Van der Vorm is showing a rich vein of form, and he's on the inside of Mikhail Simoncic going into turn one. Job done. Van der Vorm runs wide. He's in the gravel, and that spins the car around.
Vincenzo Scarpetta. Now, Jacob Bidstrup found the gravel, but thankfully was able to recover the car from there, which didn't mean that we had to have a safety car intervention. And Andrew Morrow doing as much overtaking as he opened up such a gap over the pursuing drivers that no one else really stood a chance in getting on terms with him. There was lots going on, and one of the drivers making good progress was Tom Fleming, new to the Ferrari Challenge this year, but taking to it like the proverbial duck to water. Unfortunately, one or two of the to turn number one, and good job done also by Jan Salmon. He made it through to P2. There was a coming together between Germana Toniella and Alexei Komarov, and Shintaro Akatsu in the 115 car found himself stricken across the track. A number of drivers having to take evasive action, including Alvaro Ramos and Charles Chan having to take a...
Pirelli Am, Arno Dalmeyer taking a look at AC. They make contact and both cars spin around and into the gravel. That brings out the safety car. At the restart, Michel Gatting needs to gap both Luca Nurmi and John Vortique, and Christian Brunsburg needs to do the same from Sergio Paulet and Hugo Delac. Regrettably, it wouldn't be many meters of tarmac before the safety car would be called for. Unfortunately, Martin Nelson, the Scuderia Autoropa driver, pirouetting on the grass, and as you can see, connected, we think, with the Christian Kinch.
Himself ahead of Tom Fleming. And David Gosner was just picking off the drivers one by one, including yesterday's Victor Hanno Laskowski, as Philippe Pret went spinning around. This was Franz Engstler in the number one car. Moving up, of course, to Trofeo Pirelli Am this year. And this was Alessio Dono in Trofeo beneath the Franz Engstler car. Unfortunately, Simon Ladniak had a little touch on Philippe Pret, which sent Philippe Pret around. And that wasn't the only one, because this battle that was going on between Adrian Sutil and Max Mugelli, of course, Adrian Sutil having to fight his way back up the order. Eventually, he would succeed in this battle between the two of them. But for Trofeo Pirelli, there was no doubting the dominance of Alessio Dono. 488 Challenge Evos. Motohiko Isazaki doing a very good job, and Paolo Scudieri and Boris Gideon, were they coming together now? Paolo Scudieri able to get the car pointing in the right direction very, very quickly, and then disaster for Motohiko Isazaki in the 105 car. Unfortunate circuit to get the best out of. There were some bold and ambitious moves, including this one from Roger Montfort, who made it count and made it stick. A brilliant overtake. Lance Corley, of course, local driver leading in Copichelle Am, and what an opportunity presented to David Voronin, who got himself ahead of Cameron Root, perhaps with the advantage of a back-marking driver that played into his hands nicely. One or two cars would fall by the wayside, including that of Thor Haugen.
Big move in terms of the points, but Justin Wetherill in AM2, hugely aggressive down into turn 7, just tapped the back of Burrows, both able to continue, but Wetherill said, I'm not done with that. And a lap later, a huge move again on Burrows down into turn 7, but he overruns the corner. The savviness of Martin Burrows gave him the over-under move, and then Burrows feeling the pressure right here as Keeson Chen starting to come up through the back.